To get around anywhere in Baldur's Gate, you need to use some sort of movement speed. Click on the floor and your character strolls over using movement speed. Jump over the gap that's in your way and you use movement speed. Drink a fly potion and your character is granted the power of flight, which uses movement speed. But what if we were to completely disallow any use of this? At first, it sounds impossible. To get around or to move at all, you have to at least click on the floor at some point, right? Well, let's find out. Some quick ground rules before we begin. Anything that uses movement speed while in combat or turn-based mode is not allowed. That means no walking, no jumping, and no flying. And while you could just use Storm Sorcerer's Flight, I will forbid myself from using this. It literally has flight in the name, and it just wouldn't be that interesting. Alrighty, let's begin. This run in particular is very different from the other runs I've done, as right when we spawn in and jump out of our Nautiloid, we are, for all intents and purposes, completely stuck. What am I even supposed to do now? But after some thinking, I got a plausible idea, although it would require multiple playable characters as early as the first room. To achieve this, it was therefore time to hit one of the buttons that I have barely ever used, multiplayer. Now you could use friends to do this, but since I don't have any, I just used direct connect instead. And so, by opening 3 extra instances of Baldur's Gate on my PC at the same time, I could join with them all on the same save file. Yeah, second time's the charm, this had to work. Yeah, no, now we have a different problem. I have 4 controllable characters, sure, but they are all in different parts of the room, completely out of reach of each other. So it was back to the drawing board again. For my third try, I only joined with 1 extra instance to begin with. The first character I made into a Halfling. As for the class, I made sure to start as Cleric. Subclass won't really matter, what is important is just that we have access to command. Something that will be very important, however, is the stat distribution. We absolutely need 16 strength. For a second character, I simply picked Gale. His spells and stats don't matter at all, but it will still be important to have him as an origin character, if we somehow manage to escape the Nautiloid, that is. With my 2 pre-made characters ready, I started the game, and just like last time, they spawned quite far away from each other. But here's where the difference with not having all 4 characters right away shows itself. Now when I open the other 2 instances and joined, making sure that they are both halflings and have 16 strength, instead of spawning on one of the other sides of the room, our newly made characters instead now arrive right next to the first one we already made. With the characters now in place, it is time to put my plan into action. 16 strength is normally not enough to do much. A human-sized character or even a dwarf simply weighs too much to at all pick up. But that is what is special about gnomes and halflings. They both weigh just 35 kilograms. This means that even something as little as 16 strength is enough to pick them up. And there just so happens to be a not so hidden ability that can work as movement with enough imagination. And this ability is throw. Since my halflings could now pick each other up, that also meant that they could form a train where they continuously throw each other. So as long as I made sure to not throw anyone too far, we have achieved movement. It may be painfully slow and required over 50 throws just to leave the first room, but it is movement nonetheless. And so begins the painstaking process of traveling out of the first room, over past us, to the meeting spot with Lae'zel. Before entering the fight, I took a short rest as my characters are not doing well. And with 4 characters, even though they are immobile, since this is the most tutorial of all tutorial fights, it went like a breeze. That was a fun 30-second distraction. Time to keep throwing halflings, I guess. After way too long, I make it over and past Shadowheart and all the way into this room, where I carefully pick up this chest before throwing my way over to the helm. All in all, it took around 1.5 hours to get here. Time well spent, I say. Before entering the helm, I make sure to place the chest right here so that it covers the entrance. Our main priority here is just to get away from the entrance while making sure that our Mind Flayer friend doesn't die all too fast. Since we have a cleric, the second issue can easily be solved. All I need to do is throw her in and disarm the commander using a command drop, reducing his damage from 40 per turn all the way down to 12. And since I put the chest in the way, the other approaching cambions simply stop in front of it. Now with the scary enemies thoroughly distracted, it just took a couple more turns to escape. Down at the beach, I got the pleasure of waking up 3 times with halflings and once with Gale, who also somehow managed to get down to the beach. The way we are going to escape our halfling hell is by long resting. By long resting, during the first sleep, a cat called Tara will come and bother Gale. It gives him a ring that he can consume to calm down his arcane hunger, but more importantly, remains in camp the next morning. Cat lovers, I'm sorry, it's time to look away because something not too pleasant is about to happen. On the poor cat's corpse, we find an item that will save us from this purgatory, the Tresem Collar. It has the level 5 spell Telekinesis on it, a spell that is normally obtained at level 9. We're still level 1 by the way. Telekinesis allows the user to throw objects or creatures 18 meters, which for the record is like 40 halfling throws. The amulet only works once per long rest, and so each time we use it, we will have to take a partial rest. However, it is still orders of magnitude faster than throwing people. I threw myself all the way over to some plunderers and very convincingly showed that they should stay away. Now with my first level up, I picked up Disguise Self on Gale, and for the small chance that it might do something, multiclassed into Sorcerer's Wild Magic on my Cleric. 20 or so partial rests later and we arrive at the Grove. Since we have yet to use any spell slots, this fight is really easy. Even the enemies that are out of sight are not safe, as I can just use telekinesis to bring them over. Even though entering the Grove would grant us some small rewards, it would take way more effort than it is actually worth, so I just moved straight on towards the Blighted Village. Right outside it, I got the one Wild Magic Surge effect that is at all beneficial, letting me teleport 9 meters one whole time. Before entering with Gale, I used Disguise Self to become a drow and entered the Blighted Village completely normally. Still needing a tiny bit of XP for level 3, I went straight over to the Ogres and got their horn. Level 3 lets us pick Misty Step. Gale can now move around all on his own, and so we can dismiss the final halfling to join the others in the small box where they belong. Arriving at the goblin camp, I grabbed some more free XP with my drow form. Withers now appears in camp, which would let me swap classes on Gale. However, actually reaching him won't be all that easy, as he is inside this room here, and we only have one Misty Step to work with. To at all make it to him, I have to teleport as far in as I possibly could, letting telekinesis bring him just close enough to talk with. We can now let Gale figure out that innate talent is way cooler than reading books, and respec him over into a sorcerer. Sorcerers get access to the meta magic distance spell, increasing any spell's range by 50%. Sorcerers can also convert our unusable level 1 spell slots into sorcery points, in turn turning them into level 2 spell slots, giving us 2 Misty Steps per partial rest instead of just 1. I follow Gut into her secret dungeon, luring her just close enough to speak with using a minor illusion. On her corpse, we get the first few items that are actually worth anything. But even cooler than that, on the other side of the room is a chest that contains the Amulet of Misty Step, giving us yet another Misty Step each partial rest. I solved the puzzle to enter the Underdark, and after reaching the colony, circle all the way back around to speak with some Gith, putting us very close to level 4. For the last bit of XP, I just snuck past some Dwergar and stole their boat, sailing over to the Grimforge. Now at level 4, we get a feat, and it can really only go into one thing, and that is Charger. This feat is probably one of the worst in normal runs. It gives you 2 abilities that can move your characters up to 9 meters, but requires both an action and a bonus action. What is very important about this though is the fact that it can be used infinitely outside of combat. We can now move around at least somewhat normally without needing to stop for a quick nap every 5 meters. I immediately make my way over to this door here and unlock it with Knock. Behind it is this encounter with some slimes. If we at all trigger this fight, they will surprise us and kill us before we even get a turn. Thankfully, it can be skipped by carefully avoiding the dripping puddles on the floor. Our prize for making it past them is an encounter with a gnome that threatens to blow us up. Those explosives she has is something we really need, so after convincing her to give us a tiny vial of it, I immediately enter turn-based mode before she can collect it and grab the big explosive myself. Flawless plan really, how could this possibly go wrong? Turns out she just pickpockets the explosive from our inventory if we attempt to collect it. I guess peace was never an option. Now with the big explosive, it's time to completely ignore the 100 quests or so remaining in Act 1 and head straight over to Act 2. I carefully navigate my way around some harpers that would trigger a huge fight we are not ready for at all, and collect some free XP from a couple of birds. Going into Last Light is not something I'm interested in doing either currently. Instead, I just walk past it and continue straight over to the ambush spot where Carnage Furnace and his crew walks past. One easy persuasion check later, we have his moon lantern, and with it, protection from the shadow curse. I decide to head straight over to Moonrise, and Minthara, who, since we did not interact at all with, is here, alongside the immortal Ketheric. After getting dragged away, we can find her down in the cellar getting her mind tortured. To free her, we just need to pass a few checks and then just teleport straight out. She now joins us in camp, and something that is special with Minthara is the fact that she always, regardless of the rest of the party's level, is level 6. We are not even level 5 yet, so having her at level 6 is a huge deal. I decide to put them all into Monk of all things. At level 3, Monk gets the Way of the Shadow subclass. It gives us Cloak of Shadows, a reusable 10-turn invisibility, but most importantly, Shadow Step. One of the only teleports in the game that can be reused indefinitely. Something important to note though is that both the invisibility and Shadow Step can only be used while the area is at least obscured. Now with actually good mobility, it was time to try and end Ketheric's immortality by freeing the Night Song. I went past the House of Healing and solved the puzzle to enter the Gauntlet of Shar. Further into the Gauntlet of Shar, the Necromancer Balthazar is waiting for us. We need to make sure that he dies before we try to free the Night Song, or else he will just be in her prison waiting with an army of skeletal friends. Balthazar himself is way too strong for us to handle, and so is the fight with the Justiciar before. To solve this, we of course need to merge their combats, and if we can just get over to his door, we can simply cast Knock to do it. Normally, we would just need invisibility to sneak over to the door. However, using any sort of action, like Misty Step, breaks invisibility. This is where Shadow Step is special. Because it is a class action, it is not considered a spell or attack, and therefore does not break our invisibility. After getting over to the door, we can simply go to camp and grab Knock and Alert, letting me open the door before anyone else can react. As you probably know, Balthazar does lose this fight, but it takes a very long time. So while we wait, why not hit the subscribe button? It is free and you can always unsubscribe later. Flesh and Balthazar finally go down, and with no real option of running, I just let the remaining Justicar take out Minthara as well. We can just resurrect her with Withers after all. Since convincing Yurgir might be a bit hard, I decide to instead just go to the easiest of the trials. This one just requires getting to the other side, which easily can be done with a single Misty Step. With the one Umbral Gem collected, I used Knock on the door downstairs, gathered my party, and went into Night Song's prison. Since Gale won't actually have enough Misty Steps to get all the way down to the bottom, I instead just used Gravity to give him an easy way out. With the Night Song now freed, there is not much more left to do than to head over to Moonrise and take on Ketheric. Considering this is the first time I've spoken to Jaheira, she is really easily persuaded into thinking that I'm an ally. Cyrell is waiting for us right inside, but since I don't want Jaheira to actually die, I do not want to trigger this encounter. I can't just sneak past her with invisibility either this time, since I will need my sorcerer spells for the encounter to come. So we're just gonna need to find another way inside. By heading around over to the toll house and down to the docks, we can instead enter here through the back entrance. And by sneaking before entering, we don't even trigger combat with the dozen enemies inside. This means that we easily can Misty Step right over to the door before escaping up the stairs before they can do anything. We are now behind almost all of Moonrise's forces. To get past the last few, I just had to carefully position myself in this exact spot. Any closer to the right and combat would simply trigger. From here, I could Misty Step past the last ones and make my way up to the second floor, just in time to encounter yet another couple of guards. I do not feel like fighting these either and just want to leave through the door up to the roof. Thankfully, the door here is left open, so I can Misty Step into the room, destroy a couple of doors, and that way move around to get direct line of sight, letting me escape up to the roof. Now comes the reason why I didn't just use Monk's invisibility to get straight up here, and that is that we now have haste available for Aelin. And as I'm sure, if you've seen any of my recent videos, you know how this ends for Ketheric. He flees the scene, taking Night Song with him, but we are not quite done yet. There is still a whole heap of Necromites just waiting. The first step is breaking this combat. Since I am right next to the door, all I have to do is just cast invisibility before escaping. Since Ketheric is gone, we can now grab Monk again, and upon re-entering the roof, the encounter is triggered even though we are invisible. This is a real problem as it won't break even if they cannot find us here, and escaping down into the Mind Flayer colony is not allowed if combat is going on. To not get spotted as soon as I walked in, I just made sure to lure all the enemies over to the other side of the roof. Combat did not trigger now, letting me sneak my way over to the way down. I know there's a lot of going back and forth between monk and sorcerer, but sadly it cannot be helped. This time I made sure to grab alert and the blink spell. Finally, we can follow Ketheric down into the colony. Using only Misty Steps, Minthara is able to make it all the way over to the elevator. I activate it and go down, and since I don't want to waste any more spell slots, push her all the way over to the door with Gale, before reusing the elevator to go back up with just him. Upon entering with Minthara, even though Gale is in the cutscene, when we actually get in, he is still standing all the way up on top of the elevator. I make my way all the way over to the Night Song with Minthara without getting spotted, by sneaking and using 2 Misty Steps. Now in the fight, both Ketheric and the Mind Flayer would immediately destroy me if they got the chance to, but since we have alert, our initiative is well above theirs. Still, if they get a turn, we will just die, so it's time to utilize Blink. At the end of each turn, Blink rolls a d20, and upon at least 11, transfers us away, leaving us completely untouchable. And so, all Ketheric and his gang can do is just stand and watch as they pass their turns. Now with my turn again, I free Night Song, leaving Ketheric vulnerable. I don't actually need to kill him outright, but I do need to get him at least somewhat low. And so, I spent a couple of turns throwing chromatic orbs at him, escaping back into the ethereal plane anytime my turn ended. With Ketheric now somewhat lone, it is time to finally use the giant explosives we got all the way back from Philomene. I put them right next to him and blow it up, killing him and downing myself in the process. Myrkul now shows up and he gets his turn and kills me. How are we going to beat this fight if we are not even in it? Well, as it turns out, the fight does not actually end upon us dying, as Aelin is immortal. She can get downed, sure, but that does not end the encounter. And since Gale is just standing upstairs, we have not yet lost, as we still have one more playable character. So that answers how the fight goes on, but how does Myrkul die? Well, as you can see, he is burning, and he will continue to burn forever, as the fire surface is created from the rune powder bomb and will last indefinitely. This is why killing Ketheric with specifically the explosion was so important. If I were to just have skipped to the second phase and used the explosive on Myrkul, he would not have caught fire. Since burning does 1 to 4 damage and Myrkul takes 2 less damage from all sources, it does between 0 to 2 damage each turn. It therefore takes an eternity, but eventually his HP will tick all the way down. What makes this even slower is that Myrkul summons necromites each turn that all have to skip their turn before he gets another one. After 1 whole hour of waiting, he falls below 275 HP and now starts calling over necromites to feed on, healing him all the way back off to full health. Fantastic. There is a limit to this too, thankfully, as after eating a few, he completely stops spawning new ones. So now we just have to wait another hour and watch as Myrkul slowly dies from the fire damage. Gale is now free to enter the arena for the first time. I navigate my way past a horde of necromite corpses, which all do have things in them, but I really cannot be bothered to loot them. So I just grab Ketheric's netherstone and leave. Jaheira is standing here waiting for us. She, just like Minthara, is also always locked to a level, but instead of level 6, it is level 8. This means that after turning Jaheira into a monk, she gets an additional feat, meaning that I can pick both Charger and Alert. We get awoken by the Gith, and since the first area starts us off next to the campfire, Shadow Step is unavailable. Thankfully, a Misty Step works just as well. I sneak down to the Emperor, and before engaging, make sure to equip the telekinesis amulet on Jaheira and drink the 1 free Hill Giant Strength potion we got from camp, before also using a haste potion. Since we have alert, we start first, which lets me use Shadow Step to teleport up to this ledge and throw the first Gith off thanks to our 21 strength. Because we have another action and Monk gets an extra attack, I can use telekinesis to bring another Gith up, also throwing him off. The Emperor stuns the other 2 off camera for some reason, but still counts, letting me easily throw them both off on the following turn. Now in Act 3, I will need quite a lot of money. Selling all the items that Ketheric carried and everything else I have collected thus far only gave me 2,800 gold in total, but it should be enough, hopefully. Inside of the Circus of the Last Days is the Genie Akabi. He has a wheel which you can gamble on to maybe win his so-called jackpot. To get it, you're supposed to either buy or pickpocket his ring, as it's the thing that helps him rig the game to never be a win for you. If you do not steal the ring and instead just play, he just gives you useless joke items, like this +1 breastplate that allows you to bring an additional person to a wedding, or this eternal wine that just damages you upon drinking it. Every spin also costs an absurd 500 gold, and the items are not worth it. Mostly, at least. There is one item that after spinning his wheel 4 times I managed to get. The Boots of Very Fast Blinking. They grant a skill called Disrobing Blink. It is identical to Misty Step and can be used 1 time per turn without any cost, but it also leaves all your clothing behind. This drawback is usually too much in normal playthroughs, but for us it does not matter. Right now we literally do not use any equipment apart from some amulets, which won't get left behind anyways. I make my way past the checkpoint, but since I cannot enter the normal way into Worm's Rock due to not having flight, I was forced to take a bit of a detour through the back entrance. Here now, I agreed to help Gortash take out Orin and head over to the lower city, instantly moving over to the sewers and down to the Temple of Bhaal. Since we are not the Dark Urge, and the door cannot just be knocked open, I'll have to get the Amulet of Bhaal from Saravok before facing Orin. To get in, we will need a passcode, which can be found on the assassin Dollar. Dollar can first be found planning an assassination here at the wine festival. Upon approaching him, he immediately leaves, just leaving behind a few copies of himself. These clones are really tough, and there's no real reason for me to fight them, so I just break combat with invisibility. Dollar can be found right next to the Baldur's Gate waypoint, where he is planning another assassination. Entering the building triggers a cutscene, and so I decide to do it with Minthara. Since Dollar arrives as soon as it starts, I can simply swap from Minthara to Jaheira, and using invisibility teleport in to pickpocket the wrong item. Yeah, turns out it's the scroll we need, not the hands. Thankfully, all I have to do is disengage, let Minthara die, and then wait out Dollar's invisibility before doing it again. This time we don't get the luxury of escaping, but that's fine. Anyways, after a quick resurrection, it's time to head down to Saravok using the passcode we got from Dollar's note. Interestingly, Jaheira cannot actually become an unholy assassin, as Saravok knows who she is, so I just use Gale to go down instead. And after a simple deception check, get granted the role of unholy assassin along with the Amulet of Bhaal. Now with access to the temple, it's time to deal with Orin. There is a very easy way to kill her using this potion I got from a vendor, but in order to do so, I need to get up close, undetected. And the altar where she stands has candles all around it, making it impossible for me to get there without breaking invisibility. To get around this, I respec Minthara over to a cleric for Create Water, and by positioning her just before the cutscene triggers, I can upcast the spell and extinguish all the candles. Now with access to the altar, I have Jaheira drink the Cloud Giant Strength Elixir and head right down beside Orin. From this exact spot, with enough strength, it is possible to simply throw Orin off the edge, instantly killing her. Just need to grab the second Netherstone and die now. We can now meet up with Gortash and show him our stones, getting him to head straight to the Morphic Pool. Before leaving for the final encounter of the game, we still have a few preparations to make. The first one is getting Gale to level 7 for greater invisibility. It will take 4,500 XP, which may sound like a lot, but it can easily be gamed from solving the chambers just down under Worm's Way. Next up, I went over to Sorcerer's Sundries and bought 2 Dimension Door scrolls. In Loroakan's tower, I also found a Globe of Invulnerability scroll, and had already prior collected the Artistry of War scroll from the vaults. Finally, I make sure that Jaheira has access to Dimension Door and greater invisibility, and respec Minthara so she has Shadow Step. In the Morphic Pool, I meet up with Gortash, who immediately gets KO'd by the Netherbrain. Thankfully, the Emperor saves us, and after following him, lets me turn Gale into a Mind Flayer. Now in the upper city and the final area of the game, we can just skip past all the fights here, thanks yet again to Shadow Step. it really has been the MVP of this run. Importantly, before entering, I drink a haste potion with Minthara. Since some of the spell plagues that get summoned have counterspell, I use a slow from the Emperor to bait it out. This in turn lets Minthara Misty Step up to Gale, and after casting greater invisibility on him, use the 2 Dimension Door scrolls we bought to teleport him all the way over to the crown. Since Gale has Mind Sanctuary, he can use Karsus' Compulsion while still remaining invisible from greater invisibility. I use Jaheira's turn to move a bit closer before also turning her invisible. Upon ending my turns, both Minthara and the Emperor get annihilated, but they have already done all they need to do. During my next turn, the portal into the Netherbrain opens, automatically entering with Gale. In order to make it there with Jaheira, I again just need to bait out all 6 counterspells with a Misty Step before using Dimension Door. Just the brain left now. I start with the honor mode version of Mind Sanctuary, hasting everything inside it, before using the ability that will let us easily kill the brain, Fierce Perilous Stakes. It grants all instances of damage we deal an extra 15 psychic damage. Perilous Stakes does have a downside though, making us vulnerable to all damage. And since, whenever the brain is attacked, it triggers brain quakes that deal up to 60 damage, which would get doubled to 120, there's a big chance we would immediately get one shot if we were to attack it. This is why Jaheira carries the Globe of Invulnerability scroll, creating an area in which nothing can get damaged, letting me do some huge damage with the Artistry of War scroll and a magic missile. Since the brain becomes invulnerable to psychic and force damage on its following turn, I just spent it refreshing the stakes and creating another level 4 spell slot, before teleporting down with another Dimension Door to avoid the collapsing floor. On the following turn, the brain loses its invulnerability, letting me cast another few magic missiles, bringing it down and finishing the game. This one was rough, especially that start. I mean, I guess that's just how most of these challenge runs go after all. Thank you so much for watching. Consider watching another one of my videos if you feel like it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.